Eddie Van Halen here, telling you, keep playing, man. Gotta keep playing. It's the only thing there is. Music, man. Keep playing. All right? I'm gonna come looking for you if you don't.
All right, here we are. I was going to say, I'm thinking it's Thursday already, Transdram Thursday. No, it is the Guitarsenal on Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. Happy New Year, everybody. Here we are.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We got some special guests tonight. We've got Jason Tong down there. We've got Simon Hosford there in the middle. And we're going to be going through some gear talk tonight. We've got John right there with the Headfirst Alta. And that's Mark II, right?
Woo!
Mark II.
Mark II, going to be talking about that. We've got some interesting things that Jason's going to be talking about, things he's working on. And obviously Simon has been playing some of these things, so he's got some good history with it and some information on it. So let's go.
Yes.
John, you've got the amp, so kind of tell us where you're at with it, your experience so far, and we'll let you kind of take it over. And
what led to it?
What led to it? Well,
yeah, what led to it?
it's all Jason's fault. We when I got it, I plugged it in just straight in, hooked up a cab, plugged it in, turned it on, and hit a couple of chords, and I was almost pissed off at Jason. I'm like, this fucker. how many amps have I been through and all of that sort of thing. It's like I said, if I ever had a signature amp, that's it right there. It's like tailor-made for a guy like me. So,
and we all know here on the channel that you've been through a couple. You had the, we're not comparing, but for you personally, you had the Friedman BE100 Deluxe.
Mm-hmm.
Then you went with the Shure SL
68,
the Mark II version, I guess.
Mac 2, as Simon says.
Did you find that those two amps were very, very similar in the way that they felt? Kind of, you hear if you're going to play a Marshall or a Marshall type amp, you better know how to play because you have to, be really articulate with it.
There was some similarities for sure, but I would find that I found that Dave's amp, the BE100 Deluxe, is more, I think the circuit, and Jason will correct me if I'm wrong, I think the circuit is more akin to a plexi circuit as opposed to...
Well, everybody says that Friedman makes the best Marshalls now, so...
Or as opposed to what this is, which is an 800 or an old JMP type of bass, we're not talking clones here. So when I had Dave's amp, it had all the switches on it, the SAT switch, the FAT switch, the different voicing switch, and the same thing, the depth and the presence to tune the power amp section. But I could never get it to sound what it sounded like in my head, what I wanted a Marshall to sound like. It was almost like it was too clean or too saturated. Nowhere in between. And it's not, it does what it says on the tin. It's about me kind of finding my way with it. And as far as it, it's a preamp based amp, so it didn't do what the SL68 did. And what the SL68 did was fantastic.
But you had to crank it.
No, because it had the post-phase inverter.
Oh, that's right.
Volume. But it did one thing.
Does one thing. Yeah.
And it's the best at it. Dave's amp, nothing like it. This amp is nothing like it in the way it... What would you say, Jason? How it feels under the fingers, or how it does its thing?
I mean, it's one of those things that's, as you probably just said, right? You kind of got to play it to understand it. But this was a circuit that, as you say, right? Clearly, Marshall inherited, like Marshall bass. And people say Marshall, it can mean a lot of things, obviously, because Marshall didn't just have one circuit or one amp.
Well, they stopped at 800 and then Well,
Yeah, well, even that's right. So Trey's got a 900. Come on. Even the 800 is a series.
Yep.
And inside that series of amps were a whole lot of different models, and the models are quite different actually. We like to talk about 2203 and 2204, the 100 watt and the 50 watt master volume, which is a circuit that first appeared as in the JMP, as you said, John, right, and then got carried over into the 800. So the very first years of the JCM 800s were essentially just cosmetic. It's just a different box inside the amp, basically identical than what was in the JMP, the late 70s. But in the 800, I remember looking this up one time because it was a question that I got or something like that. I can't remember, but it's like 10 or 12 different actual amplifiers under the JCM 800 series. And you guys will all remember and know that, towards the end of the 800s, they released their first split channel or two channel amplifier, which was, first came out as a 2205. And then I think the model number got kind of moved into 4410 or that series in there, which was still called JCM 800s. But that circuit has diode clipping in it and all kinds of things, and it's completely different than the earlier. When people talk about 800s, they normally mean a 2203 or a 2204.
Right.
So so within the Marshall thing, it's just such a broad spectrum of sounds. The BE circuit which features in a lot of Dave's amps, right? That's his signature, signature sound, isn't it? And he will adjust it based on the power section that it's pushing into, and perhaps what that particular amp is geared towards. But the core architecture there is in the BE is it's set, right? He created it and it's set, and essentially in channel 2 or the BE channel, it's an extra gain stage out the front of a plexi is the way to think of it.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
So it's three gain stages, because a plexi only has 2 gain stages, and then the cathode follower, then phase inverter and power set, the power tubes.
Yep.
When you put a gain stage out in front of that, then obviously you have 3 gain stages, cathode follower, and then the power tubes. And the first, when Marshall came out with their master volume amps, which was the 2203 and 2204, that was 3 stages straight out of the box.
Okay.
So the way that a master volume was introduced into the amplifier, and to still allow you to get some gain, was they added a gain stage in the preamp. Right. So when you think about a plexi and an 800, that's why it's got a master volume and still generates gain, even if you have the volume down. They do open up obviously and sound better when they're louder, but
right.
At the same volume, an 800 or a 2203 has a lot more gain than a plexi. Down low.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Down low. When you turn them up, it's a different animal, right? But so John, you're right. The channel 2 in these amps, right, in the Alta, is based around that 2203 kind of architecture, if you like, right? So it's 3 gain stages straight up.
And I think that you had mentioned the first time that you were here, which I wasn't able to make the show, but and thank you guys for coming back as well for a second time, second go around.
Of course, anytime.
I think that you had mentioned that you made this amp kind of for yourself and the sound that you heard in your head.
Yeah.
So, as far as the development of the amp, I think you had mentioned too, you had changed over to the second iteration here. And what were the changes for the second version from the first?
Yeah, revision 2, pretty minor actually, but I changed the voicing. So the amplifier has 2 bright voicing options, which I'm sure John's not in there, right? He's played with it. So these are I've just got my foot switch here, and you can see, if everyone's watching, you can see these are push button LEDs, right? So they activate channels and different voicing options, which is like you can change the brightness of the channel. You can put diode clipping in or out. There's this kind of stuff. You can activate the effects loop in and out, or remotely via MIDI change control messages or program changes, which is what I'm doing there. And with revision 2, I'd kind of I guess over time, and this was just incorporating feedback from people that had the amp over the first, probably year and a half, I guess, since it had been out. And people were enjoying the flexibility of those bright options. There's 2, so you can have both off. You can have one on, or the number 2 on. And they're different levels of kind of attack and aggression and brightness. Or you can actually put both on and they sum together. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so unlike a bright switch, which you find on a lot of amplifiers will have a bright switch, it's kind of either off or on, or maybe it's 3 position where you have off and then one sector is off and then another on the other way. Because this is how this is set up with switching, you can actually, you put them both on and it sums together. But anyway, the feedback was that, gee, it would be nice if they were a bit more aggressive, particularly for the high gain guys. Because it was kind of covering, the amp was already covering all the kind of mid gain, hard rock stuff pretty happily. Yeah. And so that change was just revoicing those. And in revision 1 of the amp, it has a vintage or modern mode. Okay, so one of the settings on this panel here, which changes the gain stage setup for that channel, is either vintage or modern. Gotcha. And as the name kind of is probably self-explanatory, right? But it's in vintage mode. The amp is a bit lower gain, a bit more kind of rounded on the bottom end, not as tight. So you think, kind of 70s tones around there, And then in modern mode, you got more gain, and it's tighter in the bottom end. So we're kind of more into, modded 80s kind of stuff and beyond. And in revision 1, that feature only worked for channel 2 and channel 3. Gotcha. Didn't affect channel 1 at all. Now it does. Gotcha. So
just a little more control over the whole aspect of the amp as far as tones and so forth. So then you've got probably people that were still asking for more gain, so you came out with the amp that's on top. Is that right?
There's always people who want more.
Right. Yeah. No matter how much you give them, they always want more. Yeah. So
that's sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the Evil Joe is it's fun to play. Like for me personally, it's easier to play. It's more compressed.
Right.
The alto is more open and I wouldn't say old school, but it's certainly more, maybe a bit more articulate. Is the way to describe it.
Yeah.
A bit more punchy. There's also this is 100. This is a 50. Right. And that's not. I don't say that in terms of how loud they are, because clearly a 50 watt is a little bit less volume than 100, but it's not much.
It's only a few decibels.
A few decibels, right?
The headroom.
It's more about the feel of a 50 watt amp versus 100, and it's not just that there's 2 less power tubes, clearly, right? This is 4 EL34s in the 100 and 2 EL34s in the 50.
Right.
The filtering. So if everyone has looked at the back of an old Marshall, you see these big blue can caps, right? Those are filter caps. In a standard 100-watt Marshall back in the day, the good ones,
Yep.
there were 6 of those in a 100-watt, only 3 in a 50, right? And that leads to the reason there's only 3 is because the amp's not trying to pull as much power as a 100-watt can, so It doesn't need as many filter caps. What it means in terms of tone and playing is that it's a little bit more squishy.
So it affects the sag basically of the amp.
Yeah. So you actually choose a power section. You actually think about what kind of end tone you're looking for, and I probably mentioned this on the last time I was on, but the reason that the Evil Joe ended up as a 50-watt was because that's what Joe Barresi wanted. And it in terms of because that's how the Evil Joe was a one-off custom amp that I built for him February, March 23. It was, so, a little while ago now. And at that point in time, that was a one-off custom build. There was no plan to kind of bring it out as a standard model. It was only many months later that I kind of, landed on the idea that it would be a good thing to do. It's kind of like, because I've been thinking, I think about this shit every day, right? Like, what do I do?
That's your thing, yeah.
What do you do? Like, you got to think pretty long term, but you got to think about how long it takes to the whole product development cycle.
Right. Yeah.
And then you mix all of that thinking with, how long it takes with, is it going to be something? It has to be something that I want and I love first and foremost, and you've got to couple that with thinking about people going to buy it.
Now, how have you found the popularity of that amp compared to the Alta?
Really, really great to be. Yeah, got off to a great start. So it's interesting. The Alta is still. It just keeps on keeping on. That's the thing that I've been really pleased about with this amp, because it's like, even with the Evil Joe, I can't get my thingy there. This one.
Yeah.
Going backwards, it screws me up. The Alta, I was a little bit, not worried, right? But I obviously thought that when I bring the second amp out, it's going to impact sales or popularity of the Alta.
Right.
It didn't happen.
Yeah.
It didn't happen at all, right? So that was...
guitar players, they're like, oh, well, I got to have that one too. It's not like I got to replace this one with this. It's like, oh, I need that one too. So,
Well, I gotta say this as a guy who buys amps, like expensive amps. Having those two there, they're not even in competition with each other as far as I'm concerned.
Which two?
The Evil Joe and the Alta. The Alta is its own thing, and the Evil Joe is its own thing. And
exactly.
I listen to everything and I like it, but it's not my bag.
Right.
It's just completely, for me anyways, it seems like it's for a different market, basically.
Yeah.
You just
well, I mean, that's why there's Headfirst, there's Marshall, there's Friedman, there's EVH.
That's right.
Everybody has a different flavor that they like, and a lot of people like multiple different flavors. So
this is true.
Yeah. I mean, if I bought out the same amp in 50 watt, I would have called it the Alta 50. It is a different thing.
Jason,
sorry, Hoss.
I was just going to say, I've got a question with the 50 watt thing. Is that Joe Barresi wanted it a 50 watt because of that extra kind of squishiness in the power stage, coupled with the aggression of the preamp stage, or was there another reason that he wanted it as a 50 watt?
I couldn't remember that conversation with him, and
because by the way you described the amp generally, and obviously I've had the pleasure of playing it and hearing it, because of that compression that you talk about, and that more aggression. It seems to me that logically, like if this was an amp that you and I were talking about and you hadn't built yet, it would seem logical to maybe have a 100 watt back end. So I'm curious, as to why Joe maybe decided on 50.
Yeah, it was one of the whenever you tease something new or you obviously release it proper, and I think, Simon, we released this amp with a video of you playing it. That was how I kind of went, hey, this is now, up and available. You end up with a bunch of questions that come back pretty quick. And one of the very first questions that I got was, will it be available in 100?
Right.
Yeah. Hey, Charles.
Definitely people out there that will only buy 100-watt amp.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. So let's buy 100. It's like people that buy V8 cars or whatever, It's got to have a V8.
That's John up there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And is that scary for you as a designer and a builder to have a new product that's bespoke and then maybe not be addressing that part of the market? Because as you say, there are people that it's 100 watts or nothing,
Well, there are, but I thought to myself that, if someone's dead set on a 100-watt amp, then, I've got one. Mm-hmm. And then you also think long term, I start thinking in terms of multi-year product development cycles, and who knows where this goes, but I can see us with 3, 4, 5 models in the lineup, not so. In other words, there's still room for an amplifier that appeals to this market that could be 100. But what Joe said to me at that time was, because I'll just talk a little bit quickly about the backstory of how that happened. I probably mentioned this last time, but there might be a few new people listening. And Joe had contacted me on Instagram because he had just built himself a 100-watt plexi from a Mojo Tone kit. And, why is a world famous heavy metal producer building 100-watt Marshalls, from scratch? Because he likes to understand how shit works.
Yeah.
Right. Because then he explained all this to me and it made complete sense, right? He likes to know enough because it helps him get tone, unique sounds, right? He wants to know enough about how the stuff is working so that he can cope,
of course,
different things out of it. And once he built this 100-watt plexi, he realized, of course, this is no master volume on any of this thing, right? It was just
wide
crushing.
1959 super lead. I mean, he's got an environment where you can turn it up. It's all good, right? He's got a recording studio. But of course, it's a one-trick pony, and it's a fucking loud pony too. Mm-hmm. So he wanted to mod it, and then he found my channel, my YouTube channel, where I was showing Marshall mods, and then he messaged me on Instagram and said, started asking a few questions about Jose mods and stuff, and of course I helped him. And then the next thing he said, after a few weeks of this back and forward, he said, well, you should just build me an amp, a custom amp. And so that's what we did. And as we went through the kind of the conversation about what would he like to, what did he want, right? And he was clearly going down the kind of modded Marshall Jose style,
right.
Which is what this thing's all about. So I was assuming he was going to say 100 watts. Getting back to your question here eventually.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I was just thinking, of course he's going to say 100, right? And he went, look, you know what? I actually want a 50. And I was like, wow, really? And he's like, yeah. He goes, I really like how they record. Now, having been to his studio twice now and played through a good number of his amp collection, because he's got in his main room, there's a few videos on YouTube with Joe in his studio. Steve Friett, the Friett Amplification channel.
The high watt video.
Yeah, there's a couple of high watt videos, and one of them is Steve back with Joe in Joe's studio, and they're playing the high watt head that Steve has restored. And you can kind of see, if you look in the background of what's going on there, you can see these shelves at the back of the room. and there's so many heads. There's so many that he has to store them end on end.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Not, you can only see the end of, you don't even know what they are. It's like,
Right.
what is this?
Yeah,
Because you can only see the Tolex on the
yeah,
end.
yeah.
And then that's at one end, and on the other side, which is the long wall in the main room, is just cabs and amp heads just stacked one after the other after the other. So I don't know. He's just got tons of heads in there, and a lot of them are 100-watt heads, no doubt.
Yeah.
You know, Wizards and Marshalls and everything. Laneys, Fenders, Mesa Boogie. He's got all the Mark Series amps, all the way through. Every
Right.
stripe every color you name, he's got one. Like, he's got everything. So going back to the thing, and I was like 50, and I was like, oh wow. And he's like, well, yeah, like I actually really like how they record, and he's got tons of 100-watt options. The other thing that I found out about Joe, and kind of speaking with him and trying to get a sense of what he likes, he's a huge fan of Bogner. And which is not surprising, right? I mean, Bogner stuff's amazing, and I think Reinhold's a bloody genius. But he's a huge fan of the Snorkeler, and
That sounds great.
that amp and that sound, because he identifies that with obviously Jerry and early Allison Chain stuff, and
That's
he
the
recorded and
facelift amp.
produced. Yeah, he recorded and produced Jerry's latest solo record, and it was recorded at Joe's studio and mixed there. And that's, I mean, he talked to me about all that stuff, right? That's the old, a lot of that stuff was the Snorkeler amp, and also
Fish.
Jerry's got a Fish preamp that was modified by Reinhold.
Yeah.
No one really knows whether it's the same circuit as the other Fish preamps that were out there, but definitely
From what I've read, the Shark channel has been modded to a Snorkeler channel.
right.
I think there's a picture I saw where you can see both of Jerry's rack, fish units, and they've got a extra knob on there that the standard ones don't have, and it's in the Shark channel.
Right. Interesting. I wonder if, because I've studied, there is some information on the internet about the Snorkeler mod, the original
what?
amp.
Just Michael Nielsen on the weekend, he just released a video with the Snorkeler and the modded Fish preamp.
Oh yeah, I haven't watched that yet.
I've got that in a saved
Yeah.
thing to watch.
It's in the queue.
He's got this exact thing. He's done it.
So I was interested in what his conclusions were, but speaking with Joe about the Snorkeler, and that's a 50-watt. So obviously Reinhold's brought that out as a standard production amp now.
Wasn't Joe's original Snorkeler a combo, a 50-watt combo? How it started out?
I'm not sure. Possibly. I mean, I think that the photos of that amp that's kicking around on the internet, it looks pretty. I don't know. Looks like it's. It doesn't. It looks like its shell was made in like grade school workshop or something. I don't know.
I think I remember reading that some years back that original, that Joe's Snorkeler started as a 800 combo, 50-watt combo.
Right. Okay.
So you were
Well,
talking
that
about
makes sense. Yeah.
you had assumed that he was going to want 100 watts. So you actually made 100 watt according to this question.
Oh yeah.
here?
So this comment, this question here. Hi from Melbourne, Australia, Jason. Yeah. So I wonder who Melbourne guitarist is. So yeah, I did. So I did the one-off amp for Joe. It was a 50-watt. It was EL34, kind of Marshall, pretty standard Marshall power amp setup, and a couple of guys. So that amp was demoed a little bit. Like, I did a couple of videos on it before I shipped it to him.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also an Instagram clip of Cesar Soto from Ministry, the guitarist from Ministry,
Right.
playing the Evil Joe the day that I was there. So I turned up. I'd already shipped the amp to Joe. He's in Pasadena, right, California. my first trip to visit him, he'd had the amp there for a couple of months, whatever, right? And on the day that I spent with him in his studio, Caesar came around just to kind of hang, basically, and chat. And so I got to kind of stand back and watch him play through the amp, which was just mind blowing. It's always mind blowing when you get the privilege of watching a pro play,
Right.
you know? like I've had with Simon on many occasions.
Right.
And the thing about him,
it just goes out of your whole face. Bowels release, splatter releases.
the thing about watching him play was I'd never witnessed anyone play with a right hand like that. Holy shit!
Downstroke
Like
and
his
stuff.
rhythm playing, was just brutal. So anyway, he was playing a bit, and I said, man, would it be all right if I filmed a bit? You know, I always ask, right? I don't want to be that guy that kind of like just filming shit without asking. He's like, yeah, man. He's like, post it. So there's a little clip of him playing. So anyway, on the back of all that, I got a lot of inquiries, mainly local guys, right? Oh man, can you build me one? So I said to Joe, I actually said to him, this is before I even thought about bringing it out as a standard model. A couple of guys just want me to do a one-off, you know. I said, are you cool with that? And he's like, of course, go for it. So I did do, by request, I don't know, maybe 300 watt power sections. It's the same amp, but with 100 watt.
Right.
Turned out great.
Yeah.
It's cool. For the circuit though, I prefer 50.
What did you find was a little bit different that you preferred the 50 over the 100?
It's just a little bit more forgiving under the fingers. You know, like again,
just for the compression aspect.
Yeah, because this is a more, and when you know, you shouldn't confuse compression with kind of flubbiness, if you like. Like it can still be articulate and tight, but it feels it's a bit easier to play, you know. And the hundreds, and I think you could say this about many amps, the hundreds are always a little bit stiffer.
Well, it's like when you put your diode circuit, like the clipping circuit in on the head on the Alta. I noticed that it's more of a feel change almost than a
100%
sound change. You know, it's like holy Christ, I don't suck as bad anymore. Switch.
That's the cheat code, isn't it? When
it always feels to me, I like an amp with a little more compression to it. It feels with that compression, what I'm calling compression, that you feel more connected with the guitar to the amp. It feels more like a flow, I guess, if that makes sense to other guitar players. With something like a Marshall, you know, Marshalls sound great. Me personally, I've never gotten along with them because you actually have to work to play and make it sound good, you know, and I'm just not that kind of player. I get that, you know, and that's what I like about the 3-channel EVH stuff is it's got, you know, loads and tons of that
more
gain
and more plus.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
it's just easier to play.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and that's you know, very much an EVH themed group here. So you know that whole thing with the Variac on the Plexi that Ed, you know, discovered. I'm sure anyone who's tried it, the change in the feel between running your amp at, you know, a super lead at full mains, you know, 120 or 240 here, and then down at 90, or we'd dial it to 180 here. The change in feel is enormous, right? It becomes so spongy,
right?
And like that, you know, that kind of difficulty that, you know, the wrestle that can happen when you're playing an old Marshall. Yeah, it just softens out, you know.
Yeah.
Well, the SL68, the one I had, it has that built-in Variac.
Yeah.
And That's all I played on. I put it on the full thing. Fuck that. No.
The only guy I know who plays as SL68 in the high mode is Simon.
Right.
Of course. Yeah.
Hey, but before we get too much further into the show, I want to say thank you to the chat, everybody, for coming in. We're kind of involved with a lot of the deep discussion here, so sorry for not calling everybody out who is here and saying hello, but I want to say hey to the whole chat. As I see questions, I'll try to grab them and put them up. So feel free to put some down. If you want to super chat one to make sure it gets asked, you can do that as well. I see one here from Joe. He says, depending on the amp design, what speakers do you prefer? I think that makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I've been going down that rabbit hole actually in the last few months because I just I always defaulted to greenbacks very much, and V30s, like just the standard stuff,
Yeah.
But I have actually been exploring that a lot and a lot more kind of detail and experimenting. Because I think it's just something I wanted to get my head around a bit better in terms of all the different variations, like the differences with the Creamback 65 and the 75, the old GT 75s, the GTM 65s, and all these different, Celestian models. I kind of wanted to, explore that at a bit more detail on this. And that was really the catalyst for that was because very shortly, we'll have 4x12s available.
I was going to ask if you were coming out with the Headfirst.
Yeah, awesome.
That's great. Real soon. They're in production at the moment. So
very cool.
So tick me down for one, Jason, please.
Yeah.
Yes. In red, if you can do that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So they're going to. Well, they've been manufactured in the US. Okay, so for probably obvious reasons. So freight and all the rest of it, it's just
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So those have been manufactured in the same factory that built all these cabinets. That's Kyle at KSR, in Ohio. So Kyle is.
I do have to say that the workmanship on this head shell, the amp, and everything is flawless, absolutely flawless.
Yeah, cool.
There's nothing out of nothing. It was perfect, right out of the hop. So
it's critical, it's one of the things that my business partner Shay from Monomyth, and we've been on this journey together. We help each other out, and a lot of the things that we order together in bulk. So whether it's transformer orders or tube orders, stuff from Kyle at KSR, we're often putting in orders together so that we can kind of share in some economies of scale. And that quality aspect, it's just so important. And it's probably one of the reasons, well, it's definitely one of the reasons why we ended up there, because we had tried a few different other places,
right?
In the early years, like the earlier, if you go and buy an Alta from a couple of years ago, the kind of revision 1 stuff, it's not, that stuff wasn't made at KSR. It's still the same amp, same transformers. I still built it, all the rest of it, right? But the cabinetry and stuff came from somewhere else.
If you can find one, when John was talking about getting that amp, and I had seen some of your stuff going back even a year and a half ago, where Michael Nielsen had some on his channel, and I think I saw other stuff. When John started talking about getting his, I was like, what? I would really like to try one. I said, well, let me see if I can find maybe a used one. No, you can't find one. Anyway, then I went to your website to see, if you had stock available. And it's like, out of stock.
You notice I didn't say anything until my order was in. That was very much on purpose.
Right.
I knew we were getting right at the end of the run.
Yeah. So evidently people that buy them like them and they keep them. They're not wanting to get rid of them. So
they do come up. Look at, I'm obviously thankful that there's not heaps of them on the secondhand market all the time. They do They do move though. I mean, at any point in time, if I look hard enough, I could probably find one.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's on Reverb, maybe it's on one of the forums or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
in the whole United States, there might be one on the secondhand market at any point in time.
Yeah. Well, I would look forward, and I'm sure you would too, the day that I can go down to my local Guitar Center and try one while it's there, because they're a normal stock item. So I'm sure. Maybe that's some of your goal, or not. You want to stay smaller and more.
Yeah. Look, it's a good question, right? And again, one of these things that I think about a lot, and Shay and I talk about a lot in terms of our business models, because we're following the same pathway. I'm not. I mean, I understand that it'd be super convenient, players, right? You go into a guitar store and kind of play amps, but I think a lot of buying decisions now are made on YouTube, aren't they? I think a lot of people are buying things because of demos. And we've seen this whole rise of folks that are now making a living out of demoing gear on the internet, which didn't exist. I don't know, a handful of years ago.
Yeah.
I guess the thing is too, like me up in Canada, even though I'm in Vancouver, which is big hub, I didn't have an SL68 or a B100 to try.
Yeah,
but there's enough out there done by people like Simon and Michael Nielsen and all these other guys, where there's a common thread, right? So YouTube compression, this, that. You can tell.
Yeah.
What's happening, right?
Yeah.
And then, and Dave was the same way with me. Access, you email the guy. And Jason's been absolute, spot on. Any question I have, he's right back to me about it. And by time you actually, you're, first of all, what else is out there that will compare to something like this? That's there is no production amp that'll do this the way this does it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So by the time you get that far down the rabbit trail, you kind of know what you're after, right? You don't,
right?
And the feel thing, like I understand what you're saying, Ryan, but the feel thing, I very specifically asked Jason about, and told him what my experience of the SL68 and the BE100 was, and he was straight goods with me about all of it. And the decision I made was a hell of a lot more informed than going to Long Equator Guitar Center, plugging it into God knows what cab, and going chug at a low volume. You know what I mean?
Well, direct access to the guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But will it get to a point where it gets so popular that not everybody can do that?
Yeah.
Get directly with you, Jason, and say, okay, this is what I want, and this and that and this, and is this going to be the amp for me?
Yeah. Look, it's this is one of the questions that I've sought advice from Dave Friedman on. Because he's been in the game a hell of a lot longer than I have, and he's always been and continues to be super helpful, and like he's a mentor, for me.
Such a good dude, man.
I've spoken to him about this, like direct versus distributors and retail. So, in some jurisdictions or some models, and this is true in Australia, you'll have a distributor and a retailer, right? And they all want to clip the ticket. So,
yeah.
And your retail price is what it is, right? You can't really flex that. You maybe move it around a little bit, and hope for the best. But this is why in this market, the new Master Boogie 2C Plus reissue, it's 8,000 Australian dollars recommended retail price.
Wow.
All right. Wow.
$8,000.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and stuff is expensive here. Like a BE100 is, 6, right? Or give or take, maybe a bit more. But $8,000 for that amp, and what in the US, what is it? 3.3 or something? 3.4? I can't remember, something like that. Can't remember, but so that's because you do have a model here for a lot of those brands where it's a wholesaler will bring it in.
Mm-hmm.
3,600 is the
Yeah, 3,600. Okay, thanks, John. So they might be taking 20%, and then the retailer 30, and then there are some retailers that are big enough here that they bring it in direct from the manufacturer, but they'll still take 30%. So Dave's always said to me, he said, if you're selling stuff and building your brand, and you're doing it as you are, like through the internet and through your YouTube channel and using influencers and so on, don't do it. Stay direct.
Mm-hmm.
That's the future, man. So his advice to me is not to do it. And I right now I agree. If we get to the point where the stuff's in a factory and getting made by other people,
right,
on a production line, that's a whole different thing, and I'm not convinced I want to do that.
Right. Yeah.
And the return on investment, I mean, it's true, at least in my experience here in Canada, doing business, actual, providing service business, is the cost of making it big and making it accessible to everybody. The ROI is you need to make it quite big.
Yep.
And you need to invest a fuck of a lot into it before it starts paying for itself.
It's a fine line with the growing pains, the profitability, and the quality of the product. So we see where you're coming from. So, John, you had a lot of support, you said, from Jason as you were hooking up your system and kind of going back and forth and getting it to work. So maybe it's not done.
Nope.
So tell everybody exactly what you're doing with your system there now, because we've all heard it so far and it sounds fantastic. So you want to go into that just a little bit?
Sure.
I'm going to change this background. So
when I got it home, I plugged it straight in, played it, and it was the best thing I ever heard. Cab that I'm using is 2 greenbacks and 2 V30s in it, and right away it's there. So the idea is, how do we do what we do here? Because I could go a true wet dry wet setup, because I have this, and then I have a power amp and three live cabs here, and the mics and the ability to get it in. But it sounds so damn good. It's like I'm not going back to the Fractal. I don't care. I got to figure out a way to get this into the Rodecaster and out to you guys all the time, because it's honestly it's depressing to go back to a modeled sound after after the feel and all these things that nobody out there knows or cares about.
Right.
But as a player, the feedback that this gives me, and the confidence and the smile and the excitement I have to play the same songs over again and do that, it's huge.
Yep.
So,
John, can I ask a question just about going back to one of the first comments you made about when you first played the amp and you went, "This is me."
Yep.
This was made for me.
Yep.
How would you describe, your tone background, or what is it about what tone were you searching for, or I'm trying to kind of pinpoint this to people with that background, or with searching for that thing. This amp was, it nails it for them.
Right. For most of my semi-pro career, I used an 800 and an SD1.
Right.
And at the time, this fucking thing, blah blah blah. All the complaints you have. It doesn't have enough gain, and it's bottom end's too loose, and I got to jack this and all. And I went to had a Bogner Ecstasy, and there was this low mid thing I couldn't get on with. It sounded great.
Yeah.
Dave's amp, SL68. But basically, the Marshall guy. That's the or the 800 and I had a 77 JMP 50 watt. Loved it, but it didn't have the girth.
Yep.
That makes sense. The headroom, I guess. So it's always been what I thought the ideal plexi sound would be, because you hear it, but you play it, and it's like, oh fuck, no.
It's a great idea until you turn it on.
That's right.
So this one had the tone and the feel of what you were looking for, basically,
and the versatility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now,
I'd be curious to know what was the first riff you played through the amp, John?
It was just an A chord, man.
It was the John DeShane Drop C Extravaganza.
right?
It's like, fuck me sideways.
Ooh, yeah.
And that's just channel 2 with the clipping diode on, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, do you find that on that?
No, that's the really cool thing is I've got 6 different scenes or setups. So when Jason was switching around there, it's like that's a language that Alta readers can read. What he was doing there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's channel 2 is like if I'm doing any sort of cover tunes, it's generally somewhere there with either the clipping on. I keep mostly in the vintage mode because I like that, but that comes back to this. So we'll get back to how this is all happening. I went and got a Captor X, and I asked Jason about it, and he said, well, get the Sir. And I'm like, okay, I got to prove this concept out, and there's not Sirs here anywhere. So I bought that, got it hooked up, and it was like, okay, so now we've got this in here, and this is what you guys hear is the Captor X. And getting the signal path straight, and then, of course, me figuring I'll just go wet, dry, wet, so I mic'd up my real cab here and put that into a third channel, but you can't really mix the digital back end with the analog because there's latency and causes phasing and all that stuff.
Right.
So anyways, the long and the short of it is this was proof of concept, and it sounds really good. It sounds awesome, but it really does knacker the bottom end, I find, compared to a real cab. So I found, and again by Jason, he says, we'll go out and get a Sir reactive load, not even the IR one. So I found one, and it should be here next week, or whatever it is, and that should, with some good IRs, should bring back in that bottom end that I feel it's missing. But it still sounds great the way it is.
Right. And that's just because you're attenuating and tapping over
No
into
attenuation,
the
it's just
digitals.
straight out. But yeah, it's you can speak to this probably better than I can. I think it's the way this thing actually does the reactive load that's not.
Yeah, look, I think that the cab sim technology, the Dyne IR stuff that the Two Notes guys have got, and they've got they've got a bunch of other sims in their lineup now too, right? They've got power amp, digital power amp sims, and they're even kind of dipping their toe in the water with actual amp models. If anyone's had a look at their genome stuff that they're doing now. So I think that organization, I don't know this for a fact, right? This is just my view of what's going on, is that they're pretty heavy down the kind of digital processing path, DSP path, and reactive loads and that kind of, it's hardware, right? It's kind of different science. So I think that in that Captor X box, the DSP stuff that's in there is pretty bloody awesome, but the reactive load is probably not the best one on the market. So I've actually used, and Simon, I actually got this tip from Warwick Newman, who's, a well-known sound engineer, pro guy here in Melbourne. And he said, why don't you try, because he's got a Captor X and all this stuff, right? He said, why don't you try running into the Captor X so you can use the cabs and shit like that that's in there, but then bypassing, come straight out of the Captor X into your Sir load. So it's kind of crazy, right? Because it's 2 load boxes.
Yeah.
You're not using one of them. You're using one you got the serial reactive load at the back end, providing the reactive load for the amp, and sitting them between the head and the cap. Between the head and the serial reactive load is the Captor X, which is I'm just tapping a speaker sim off. I either set it up like that,
Right.
or I'm just going straight into the serial reactive load and getting a line out from that, which has no IR on it, and then having a cab block loaded up in the fractal.
Okay.
Which is where I'm going to
Yeah,
at the end of next week.
Yeah. So,
because I had to, I mean, because I just play in a local covers band, right? And I use this rig, I use the Alta for that, because it's, again, we went through the design process of that, and I wanted to build an amp for myself and then see if others liked it as well. I was thinking about what are the tones that I need, obviously I need clean tones, I need edge of breakup stuff, I need, good old kind of driven 800 rock and roll kind of stuff, right? And I want some higher gain and, something that's quite a bit liquid for leads and this kind of stuff, And those are the 3 channels, and the modes that are in the channels are kind of cover all those bases. So I'm doing this covers gig with 5 core sounds coming from 3 channels, right? So it's Plexi clean, which is channel 1. Channel 1 kind of edge of breakup, because I'm just activating the aggressive bright in there, and all that gives you that breakup. Vintage and modern mode on channel 2, it gives you 2 kind of gain styles there, and then channel 3 for leads and stuff.
just all out, yeah.
And
Let me grab this super chat just real quick. We've got Boner Jams with $4.99 super chat. He says, stopping in to spread love and STDs. Recovering from Ebola and need some beauty sleep so I can look delicious like Smitty. Thank you, Boner.
Right. STD stands for serious tone discussions, right?
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Hope you get feeling better, Boner. We've got that yuck that's kind of going around, and everybody in the chat, and I had it, and Randy had it. So, Boner, hope you get feeling better, brother.
yeah.
John, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
For anyone that's considering this particular amp, and you're a typical amp user, guitar guy, that a lot of times you play guitar and you don't like fiddling and pushing buttons and programming and so forth. How intuitive was it when you first got it with all of the buttons that are on it, figuring out, oh, this does that, that does that, I can program this way? How intuitive was it for you to just start using it right away?
Extraordinarily intuitive, because your tone stack, when you first turn it on, you've got the buttons, so you can just say there's channel 1, 2, and 3. So it's no different than any other amp. And with the tone stack, pretty much everything at right around between 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock, it's there's not a bad tone really in the amp.
And setting up your switching to a foot switch, how intuitive was that?
Easy.
Yeah.
Jason had a video uploaded with his FM3 and how he did it, and it's really as simple as putting in a MIDI block and turning the program change and assigning the right number to it, store, and that's it. And basically then of course I had to get the foot switch, the FC6 I went with Jason for the fractal.
Yep.
So now I've got scenes, so I've got 6 different tones at my foot switch, so I can go from the to the crunch, a little bit more,
And a lot more.
yeah. Just like that, and then I can add a phaser and all this other. But once I set those basic parameters, it's done. And if I'm fucking around there and because once the SIR comes, it's going to change how this all sounds. So I'll just maybe add in some bright caps, because I find this thing quite high-endy sounding. add in some of the bright caps, and you hit store, and it's done. It is
Easy
literally, if an old dinosaur like me can do it, anybody can do it.
Right on. How long does it take to get an Alta 100 from Guitar Man 45 Bow?
So, kind of doing them in runs, like I guess, kind of like a batch of builds.
Batch of cookies.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, it's based around how the supply chain works and so on as well. Like, so, you put in a big order of transformers or chassis or head cabs or whatever, and then you kind of, then you've got what you need for 10, 15, 20 amps, whatever. And then, so what I have been doing most recently, I guess for the last year, somewhere around there, is accepting kind of pre-order deposits in advance of a run, and then, getting, doing like 10 or 15 amps or something like that inside, 2 to 3 weeks, something like that, because it's like what I did, I think, since the last time I was on the channel. I might have talked about this, right? But I actually went to the US and spent 2 weeks with Shay, working in his workshop in Indiana to do a run of builds, which is all about, solving the problem of living in Australia when most of your market is in North America.
To the mountain.
And rumor has it that there may have been a video of you playing that amp that John has while you were
It
here.
was awesome.
It is actually, that's actually John's amp, 100%.
Cool.
So I did,
That's cool.
we did 11. It was going to be 12 amps, but one of the Evil Joes was taken. There's a band here Australian band called King Parrot. They're a grindcore metal band. Just kind of not necessarily my thing, but they're awesome guys. They're actually on tour. They're going on tour this year with Pantera. They're signed to the same record label as Pantera.
Cool.
Pretty serious band, And anyway, they've just recorded. They recorded their new album at a Melbourne-based studio, a place called Danger Tone. And the owner of that studio, who
Is there a highway to the danger zone?
yeah, he's the kind of like he's engineer and producer and everything, right? He's got one of these. And so the guys in the band turned up there at the recording studio, and they tried, all the heads that he's got, because he's got everything, and they landed on using the Headfirst Evil Joe for the album. And so the guitarist, on tour, he's like, I need one, right? So I had to rush express what I needed to get an amp built for those guys before they went on tour. So one of the Evil Joes from the batch of 10 that I was going to do in Indiana had already been done and dusted, right? So we did 9 Evil Joes and 2 Altas when I was there. And so I'm doing a combination of I'm shipping, literally shipping in a shipping container by sea, pallets of stuff here, because I'm still using USA made transformers.
Haybors, yeah.
Yeah, Haybor. And I actually think they're the best, and they are priced
Right. Yeah.
pretty well, right? They're considerably less expensive than Mercury, and I think arguably better sounding, actually, certainly for what I'm doing. So yeah, all that stuff, and transformers are heavy, if you're ordering 30, 40, 50 sets,
Fucking hell.
hundreds of kilograms, or
Yep.
times that by 2.2 if you want to convert it to pounds.
Stones.
Stones.
It's heavy shit, right? So you got to.
Right.
I'm now getting stuff loaded onto pallets and putting in shipping containers and over here, and then I can build. When I'm not in the US, and which is most of the time, obviously, I've got what I need here to build, and then I can ship directly to customer.
Yeah.
And it's still, that method is pretty, because I'm selling direct and I'm not having 30% or 50% taken through a distributor and a retailer.
Right.
It's still, economically it works out. So what we did, it was Shay's idea. He said to me, 6-9 months ago, whatever, he's like, dude, you're shipping shit out to Australia, fine. But more often than not, you're shipping it back.
Right.
You build the amp, and then you, as a single unit, right? I will then ship the amp back directly. Or it actually goes via Shay, right? Because he'll do a final quality check and everything in the US before it gets forwarded on to the end customer. But he was like, "Man, why don't we try?" He said, "I'll hold all your stuff here.
Mm-hmm.
You can prepare all of your main circuit boards and everything. I can do all that here in advance," which is what I did, right? I hand populated all of the componentry into the circuit board for all of those amps. I did it here in my workshop. FedEx those over to Indiana. So when I arrived, it was right at the end of November. I think I actually arrived in the US on Black Saturday, just after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And everything I needed to build the amplifiers was there.
Right.
So this kind of, doing these kind of runs is kind of how I'm doing it. So we're doing a run of amps like that, it's probably once every 2 months, give or take, right? So the next run of amps will start at the end of January. I'm just looking at the date here. So it'll be the 8th of January here. Plan is to be building, come 1st of February, we'll be building the next run.
So that means get your order in now, Bo.
Yeah, he wants one in purple, Jason.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, can do. No one's got an Alta in purple.
There he is.
Yet.
Since John has the red one, he'll need the purple one.
Yeah.
Can you do other colors as well?
Yeah. I got a guy, US guy who has who's getting in on the next run, the run that's coming in February, and he wanted Black Comet, which is the the Bogner.
Yeah.
You see on the Bogner amp. Yeah, that black Tolex with the comments on it. Yeah, you get everything.
Cool.
So if there's, if someone wants a custom, custom finish, as long as it's done in advance, it's fine, right?
Right. I think Arkansas had your link in the chat there at some point. Arky, if you could put it back in again, I'll put it up.
So you fly to the U.S. 5-6 times a year?
Did it
tentatively
twice in 2024.
Right.
So I was there May and then again early December.
Right.
Plan for this year is not set, but it'll be 2 or 3. Yeah. Probably not 5
Do you
times.
at least build in a business class flight?
Oh yeah.
You have to, man. Fuck.
Oh man, so in my old career as an IT writer, I used to fly business a lot, but now I'm doing it myself. It's a whole different animal. When I went in May, I did economy there and back, and on the way there, I kind of was all right. I kind of dealt with it, but on the way back, it was just unbearable.
You're like, I'm never doing this again.
I'm never fucking doing that again. So this time, I actually booked. Incrementally it goes up a lot, right? But I actually booked premium economy. So Qantas has, I don't know if you have it on other airlines, I'm not sure, but Qantas has this kind of premium economy, which is kind of literally in the middle of economy and business.
Yeah.
It's worth it though for a long flight.
The seat by the emergency door that gets some extra leg room.
Which is significantly better than economy, but it's not quite.
Yeah.
It's not quite
Right.
this. But I actually put in, so they have this thing where, so I flew up there on premium economy, which is cool. And then coming back, they actually, Qantas put this promotion around where you can bid for an upgrade. So for any unsold seats they have, they obviously put it out to all the people in the class below, and you can bid a dollar amount. And I bid the minimum. Literally the minimum, like, because a slider, right, and you could slide on the thing. How far? I was like, right on the left, and I got it. So I did fly business class on the way home. So.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Well, Simon, I want to get you kind of involved. Obviously, you're close by. You go over and you can play these amps. Do you own one as well, Simon?
Not currently, but I've been filling out my lottery tickets pretty much every week over Christmas and New Year's, thinking
Right.
that Santa will be good because, I've played both of them. And the problem for me now is I thought I'd be saving for one of Jason's amps, but I think I'm going to be saving for two of
Saving
them.
for both, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Now
They're great.
your main amp right now is the SL68, correct? The Sewer?
Not really for touring. I'm doing other things for that, but in the studio, it's a combination of things depending on what's required. But I'm using the Sir SL68, of course, pretty much all the time for any of the Van Halen stuff that I do, and sometimes for a couple of other things too that require like a plexi kind of sound, but. Like as you guys were all talking about earlier, the Plexi is a wonderful amp, and the Sir SL68 is a great recreation of it. But it is a one-trick pony, you know. So,
well, it kind of leads me to where I was going. You got the video where you're playing this, and you're going through all kind of different songs and so forth. You and Jason were playing together. And I think you guys were even mentioning in the video, you're like, the versatility of it. You know, you're like, all I did was turn the volume down and it nails this tone, or or we just move this and there it is. You know, so were you finding that amp is way more versatile compared to others that you've played with and been accustomed to?
Yeah, absolutely. The video that Ryan's referring to, if anyone hasn't seen it, you can find it on either my YouTube channel or Jason's Headfirst channel. It's called 12 Tones, 1 Amp. And, we really made a concerted effort to really make the 12 different sounds as far away from each other as we could possibly do it. So it wasn't like, 12 slightly different versions of a rhythm rock guitar sound or something like that. We covered metal with Meshuggah. We covered hollow body jazz stuff. We covered like crystal Alan Holdsworth style cleans, AC/DC kind of plexi-ish kind of gritty sounds, where actually was super fun. Jason and I were playing together and we double tracked it, and that came out fantastic. The versatility with the Alta is far beyond most even 3-channel heads, and that's obviously what John's finding, which is wonderful. And the other thing is, not only is it flexible in, all the options that it has and that it sounds fantastic, but you were talking about the programmability earlier.
Right.
Well, when we were recording that video and Jason had the MIDI foot switch there, it would literally just be a matter of he would dial in the sound the way he wanted. We'd mess with some of the, the bright switches of vintage modern mode and some of the stuff with the buttons, and then he would just hold his foot down on the foot switch on the MIDI controller, and it would store all of that just by putting his foot on the foot switch. So, super, couldn't be more easy to program in that way. And like John did just before, where you can then go through all your different MIDI switches one at a time and just, John was sort of going up in levels of gain, but there were some different tonal structures there too. And it's just super, super flexible. And you guys have heard the 12 Tones video, so it'll really do. And that one amp can do all that different stuff. That's new for me. I've never had one amp that can do all those different things and do them so well. That's the other thing, is it's not they're not just okay guitar sounds, and it's not just approximating those tones. We really made an effort to, and when we were recording it, whenever we were I was playing the riff of a particular person, whether it was Nuno Betancourt or whether it was Eddie, we would pull up the original recordings in my studio and actually listen to them. And then, Jason would be on the amp, like dialing in the sound. And we made a good effort to get the sounds as close to those that we were emulating. But that's only one way of doing it. That video was, I guess, in a lot of ways, to prove a point to people that that if you're going for a Nuno kind of thing, great, it can do it. If you're going for an Angus Young, Malcolm Young kind of thing, it'll do that too. And if you're going for, Eddie or anyone else, but I think that the way that Jason has designed the amp, and earlier in the chat, the question was asked, does an amp designer and builder primarily build it for themselves? And I think it's obviously that the answer for any amp designer and builder would be yes, because you have the DNA of the sound is kind of inside your mind,
Right.
and I think that what Jason's built there is, we did that video emulating, very popular and famous guitarists' tones, but equally, it's a blank canvas in terms of that everything you do with it sounds fantastic. So if it can do all those things, then it'll be able to also do what you hear in your head as
Right.
a guitarist, and I think that's what John was alluding to earlier. And I know
100%.
that Jason's intention would not have been to build an amp that's, what's the right way to put it? To build an amp that mimics other tones precisely. Jason's built an amp that he thinks sounds great from all his many years of experience and
Right.
modding amps, and also as a guitarist himself. And so I think as far as an amp that's a blank canvas for whatever someone wants to do with it, I just couldn't recommend it more highly, because it'll do whatever your 2 or 3 favorite sounds are as a guitarist, you'll be able to find in this amp, but then it'll also do another 20 more if you need it to,
Yep.
So I think it's worth mentioning too, for anyone that doesn't know what I do very well, that because I spend most of my time primarily as a session guitarist, that's a tool that is invaluable to me, because back in the day before, modeling and all the options that we have now, which are super useful for having 100 different tones and versatility. But I used to have to go to recording sessions, and I would take, my Fender Combo, I would take my old reissue Plexi, and then I would take a more modern kind of thing, like more of a 2-3 channel amp. So I used to have to drag all this stuff, and I would take my my 4x12 loaded with greenbacks, but then I'd probably usually I've got like a little low wattage open back 112 cabinet, and I would take that too, because it doesn't have the bottoms and it's got much more mid-range. So if I was going for, more of a combo type sound, but I wanted to use one of my heads instead of my Fender Combo, then I would do that. So anyway, long story short, I used to throw all this stuff into the car, but had an Elsa existed back then, I would have just taken that one head probably,
Right.
and I wouldn't have even bothered taking a Fender Combo, because I think it's pretty clear even from the 12 tones video that it will do those clean kind of Fendery sounds just as good as it'll do anything else, so.
Sort of just a side question for you. As you said, you're mainly doing session stuff. Do you go in and do you have someone say, kind of give me like a Prince Purple Rain kind of sound? Will they be that specific with what they're looking for?
Yeah, usually, sometimes they're very specific, and they'll say, "Look, we need you to dial in." Okay, so for example, in terms of a very specific thing that happened to me, a bunch of years ago, I had to play on an ad for a milk company, and they're throwing all this money at recreating the Top Gun theme, and they had. And the whole thing was military helicopters like dropping off crates of milk, and all of that crap. But anyway, so they dragged me into pretty much do an exact recreation of Steve Stevens' guitar sound and playing on the Top Gun theme.
Right.
So that's a case where it was really up to me to get it as close as I could, to the original. And in that sense, what kind of things you have to bring. But then sometimes they just give you some broad strokes. They'll say, we're looking for a cleanish kind of George Benson-y thing, or they might say, we want this to sound kind of AC/DC-ish. So they'll just give you sort of a rough idea, and then from there I might come up with my own things. But but it equally applies to when I'm not working for somebody, but I'm putting down my own guitar parts. And quite often what happens these days is we make records together sort of via, you know, almost the way we're talking here, where someone that it doesn't live in Melbourne will send me their bass and drum tracks and say, man, we'd love you to put some guitars on this. And depending on the style of music it is and the style of track, then it's up to me to have in my head, okay, what kind of sound am I going for this? And when I'm in the studio, and especially if someone doesn't have a big budget, and so I'm sort of doing it for mates rates, and so I don't have all week, you know, I've got to squeeze it into whatever else I'm doing for them. Not having to, because as much as possible in my studio, I like to record real amps rather than use plugins and virtual modeling and stuff.
Right.
I can't be spending all day re-miking different amps and messing around to try and figure out, which sound is going to work for this verse part, which sound will work for the chorus, what should I use for the solo. So having something like an alto where it's just sitting there, it's plugged in, my cabinet's mic'd up in the other room, and I can just kind of get out of it whatever sound I'm needing, even if it's, you know, it could be a Stevie Ray Vaughan thing, or it could be like a bluesy track, or it could be a metal thing. And so what Jason's really done, I think, Jason, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is taken all his experience and knowledge with a leaning to a Marshall DNA and really made it just such an incredible Swiss Army knife of any great tones over the last 30 years into one head, you know, because I guess as an amp designer, he knew it could be done.
Yeah. That's some high praise there for you, Jason, for sure.
Oh man. I'll say that video, so the 12 tones video, I can't recall how we came up. I mean, we were just chatting, weren't we, Simon? And maybe you'd suggested it, to be honest. But I remember, what I do remember about that is we worked on a list of tracks or songs, whatever, right? You know, that would showcase that kind of spectrum of tone, I guess. And a lot of it contributed by yourself because you obviously had to play it, you know. So you had ideas about the stuff that, you know, you either already knew or you get under your fingers in time, you know. But it was like, I remember the day, it was neither of us knew how close we were going to get, you know, and we absolutely did A/B. I remember sitting there and you'd cue up the actual recorded tone, and then we'd go back to the amp, and your cabinet, the 4x12 greenback cab that was mic'd with an SM57, just a single mic in that video. It's in a room that's like 2 or 3 rooms away, right? So in Simon's actual studio, you can't hear that cab. All you can hear is what's coming through the studio monitors. So it's really cool to A/B back and forward to the, you know, tone, and then I was obviously tweaking the amp. So I was surprised at how close we got to a lot of those tones, and you know, look, you know, sort of like kind of feel like I'm reflecting praise back here, but the player helps. you know, I mean, we all know this because we're guitarists. We all sound like ourselves no matter what bloody gear we're playing.
For sure.
Simon has this ability to.
He's a chameleon.
Exactly. I remember that, man. I showed up there. I'd never really seen you play much. I'd seen you play in gigs and stuff like that, right? But not just sitting there in the room just with 2 guys. And you ripped straight out. The very first thing you played when we got the amp going and we did the first take was the outro solo for Rosanna.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay, that was first. Yeah, I forget which order we did it in, actually.
That was the first one. I was just like, fuck.
That's something.
Yeah.
And for me, it was the Michael Landau bit he did. It's definitely not the most flashy, not the most technically hard, but just the feel and everything that you had, man. It just
thanks, John.
What a beautiful track it is.
It just honestly, I mean, that was a deciding factor for the amp.
Well, I remember you sent me a DM, John, I think asking me maybe about that specific part of the video and about you were surprised. And I think your question was, is that how much it cleans up really just you rolling back the volume on the guitar and nothing else? And of course, the answer is yes. You know, the other thing to say about making that video is Jason and I set ourselves some pretty strict parameters because we're trying to get all those different guitar sounds and get as close to the original guitarist's tones as possible, but using no external anything other than the head. So no pedals at all between the guitar and the head, because we wanted people to really know that even if, for example, some of the guitarist tones, like take Nuno might be a good example, right? He's known for using heads, but using a rat pedal in the front, even if the gain is turned down very low. So he's almost using it as kind of a tone circuit / boost, probably not unlike what Eddie used to do with his Echoplex preamp, right?
Right.
So, but apparently Nuno's been doing that for years. And when Nuno was in Melbourne recently and Jason and I bumped into him, that was the same situation. He was using a Marshall DSL, but he still had his rat pedal behind the amp, right?
Yeah.
So,
Simon, do you remember how he responded to? So I mentioned Warwick Newman as a good mate of ours who does pro live sound and so on. We were at that gig. We were at that gig with Woz, and through a connection that so Warwick got us into the gig, but through a connection that I'd made with this guy who works for Shaw Microphones, based out of Boston, who's old mates with Pat Badger. Right, who's obviously extreme out of Boston. We got backstage, and so we're kind of hanging around backstage, and then the guys come out, and so Warwick is talking to Nuno about his setup, because he literally had an incredible guitar tone out front. Like we saw the gig, right? We were standing by the front of house desk, and his guitar tone was just amazing, as you obviously expect. And another buddy of ours who's a pro guitar tech and amp builder himself, actually, Simon Cotter was teching for Vernon Reid. So Living Colour was supporting Extreme at this show. Simon was teching for Vernon, and so he showed us when we kind of went backstage. Simon showed us Nuno's rig. And he's just got a bulk standard JCM 2000.
Yep.
yeah, I'm pretty sure it was just rented in Melbourne, right?
He had two. He bought one head.
So he brought one, and then he had it rented as a backup.
He had two. Yeah,
Right.
he had three JCM 2000s. I remember they're all racked up. One is his favorite one that he carries around everywhere, and then two hired for backup. So we're obviously, we're all fascinated about the rig. So Nuno kind of comes out, just had a shower and changed and looking pretty cool. Was like, blah blah blah. Asked him about his rig, and Nuno's just going, no, it's just stock. And he goes, Warwick says something like, but you must have, is it modded with the JCM 2000? Well, how did he respond? It was a bit awkward, wasn't it, Simon? Because he basically he said quite a little bit aggressively, he responded and said, the mods, it's in my hands.
Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the mod's in my hands.
Just kind of probably true, actually. But, it was a bit kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, every guitar player knows whatever you play through, you sound like yourself.
Right.
So,
It's totally true.
Yeah, for sure.
Totally true.
So,
but sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
Well, I think I was just going to finish off that point about how that Jason and I, when we did the video, set ourselves kind of those strict parameters where we're trying to get the head to do all the work, 100% of capturing these other guys' tones who may have had a head plus something else or one or two other things, right? Like an EQ pedal on the way in with the mid-range boosted or just whatever. And so that made the day extra fun. But like Jason was saying, there was no proof of concept. This was just something that we had discussed and thought it would be a fun thing to do. But I hadn't played through the altar at that point, and so I didn't know how it was going to sound. Jason didn't know how it was going to sound with me trying all these different things through it. So it was a super fun day, and that's the only reason really why we were referencing the original guitar recordings, because we just nerded out and decided, okay, we knew pretty quickly that this was going to be awesome. And then we just decided to see how nerdy we could make it and how close we could get the tones. So
super cool video, and I guess you guys kind of impressed yourself with the outcome of it. That's what it sounds like.
Well, it would be an understatement to say how impressed I was. There's a couple of outtakes at the end which are pretty funny that Jason left in, but I'm sure there's plenty of other stuff where that Jason would have footage of me just not being able to wipe a smile off my face, as I was trying different things, and I was swiveling around in the chair and just looking at Jason and going, no fucking way, sorry,
no, go ahead.
No, I was done. All I was going to say is, and it was the exact same reaction that I had when Jason brought over the Evil Joe. Right. Much earlier in the discussion, we were talking about the 50 watt versus 100 watt thing. Well, I can tell you from sitting right in front of this thing, and when we did that, we decided to put the 4x12 in the control room with us, so that we could, because Jason really wanted my first impression reaction from the Evil Joe, and we decided that it was the only way to really fairly do that is to have me in front of the amp and speakers and not have it kind of diluted. And also you get the sound pressure level and the volume, and it's that's how we all grew up. I think probably the first 30 minutes of whatever footage Jason took is unusable because it's just me playing three chords and then stopping and looking at him and just smiling, and then twisting a knob and then playing some shred lick and then stopping and looking at him and just smiling. And and I was given that the Evil Joe comes from the brain of the same amp designer as the altar, I was very pleasantly surprised really, how different they are. And just like John was saying earlier, the reason that Jason's selling both of them without the sales of the altar being that affected is clearly because they're different. They're apples and oranges, and of course that's what Jason would have been going for. And I think that the fact that Joe Barresi wanted a 50 watt helps with that, because they've got different back ends, for a start, and then the architecture of the front end is different too. But the Evil Joe is a fun, amazing sounding amp. That's for sure. Cool.
So
both of these things grew out of both of these amps grew out of mods that I developed.
I've been doing for quite some time.
Yeah. And I guess the circuit that's in the Evil Joe developed over a number of years based on people that were, as always, Marshalls. Like, I've modded other amps, but they're all, anything that's come here has kind of been some derivative of a Marshall anyway. But you think about, kind of like most of the stuff that gets sent here at any point in time, there's always a couple of Marshalls sitting there ready to go in the workshop. It could be a couple, it could be half a dozen or whatever, but there's always something.
Bo was asking just real quick, do you do any modifications when you go to Indiana for any other
I have done, yes. So we did, so Shay is, so it's in Bloomington, Indiana. Okay, that's where Shay is and where his workshop is. It's about an hour drive south of Indianapolis. The birthplace of David Lee Roth.
There you
go. Right.
Yeah.
I'm surprised Randy didn't hit a sound effect.
Clip, buddy?
I don't have a David Lee Roth sound effects. That's R2. Thank you very
is it
much.
R2 that has those?
Yeah.
So Jason, when Simon was finished up with that amp, how difficult was it to yank it out of his hands when you were leaving?
It was difficult, if I recall. I'm sure I must have said to Jason, so you don't need this right away.
You just leave it here for a year or two.
Yeah, I'm just not quite sure
Right.
about some of the sounds. I might need to re-record them.
Yeah. So, real quick, you talked about it the first show that you were here because I was watching. Jim Root, he specifically wanted one of the Altas. Is there any modifications you did for his, or is his 100% just like anyone else's?
His is 100%, 100% the same.
The same.
So,
Absolutely the same.
He actually has.
Your amp, is that right?
Yes, he's got.
Okay.
He's got three
of
now,
them.
and then
Wow.
he's got the preamp, which we can talk about real quick as well. But
Yes.
he ended up with so that all happened really quickly, kind of unplanned. His connection with the amp when the band came to Australia for Knotfest in March of 23. It was. They're back here in end of February actually, so it'd be basically 2 years since their last show here. And I know this guy Mike Smith, who's the founder behind Omega amplifiers. So Mike's based in Michigan. They have the Granifier and the Obsidian, and Mike is the guitar tech for Mick Thompson. Okay, and I've known Mike for a number of years because we just connected. It's one of those great things that happen in this community where like-minded people with common interests have just connected. So like how I met Dave. It's kind of the same.
Right.
Same happened with Mike, and we keep in contact and chat quite regularly. And I wasn't aware the band was coming down because I wasn't really paying attention. And he's like emailed me, and he's like, "Man, we're coming down to Melbourne actually next week. We should catch up." And I'm like, "That'd be awesome." So I just thinking we're just gonna have a few beers or whatever, which did actually happen. But on the day that I was going to head into the city and catch up with Mike. And their front of house engineer, actually a guy called Bob Strakel. And if you look up Bob on YouTube, you'll see he's got a bunch of videos where he goes through the whole Slipknot front of house setup. Fascinating if you like live sound and audio stuff. You listen to Bob, it's amazing. Bob's actually an amp builder as well. Trainwrecks. He builds Trainwrecks amps. Yeah. So he's a real enthusiast as well, right? So. Well, here I am thinking I'm going to go and have, pizza and a few beers with these two amp guys. And on that very morning, Mike messaged me literally an hour or something before I was about to head into the city. And he's like, "Have you got one of your amps there?" I'm like, "Yeah, got my one."
You got yours, yeah.
And he goes, would you be happy to bring it in because Jim wants to try it?
Right.
Yeah, that's how that
I'd
happened.
be
Right?
happy, but it's coming.
Did your stomach just drop when he says that?
I was like, "What, Jim?" Literally, I nearly said Jim who.
Right.
I knew who he meant, but I was in disbelief. Like, what? And he told me afterwards that Mike had said to Jim when they were flying, they'd just done a festival in Indonesia, in Jakarta, and they're flying down to Australia. And when they're traveling, Mike had said to Jim, "There's this dude in Melbourne who's just released this new amp," because at that point it had been out for a few months, I guess. He's like, you should try it out. And apparently Jim said, "Well, what is it? Who is it?" And he said, "Don't worry, you never heard of him. You've never heard of it." He said, "But are you interested in checking it out?" And Jim's like, "Of course." He wants to play it, right? So anyway, played it, and he kept it. So he has my amp. It's revision 1.
Right.
Dead stock. And then he got a second one because they have an A rig and a B rig. And that's also a revision 1 bone stock. No mods at all. And then he got a third one for his home studio, which he has, at home, which is again, I did feature that amp on my channel. The one he's got in his home studio is a 50-watt version and a slightly smaller head shell.
Right.
It was kind of done by request. He wanted, he said, can you just do like a small, like the size, basically the head shell's the same size as a Marshall Studio Series amp.
Right.
SC20, it's or SH20 or whatever.
Right.
It's exactly the same size, but it's 50 watt. You know, if you think about, well, if you're careful with your measurements, you can get a 50 watt amp inside one of those head shells. Right. And then the preamp happened, and that came as a result of them building fly rigs,
right,
and rack-based rigs where they can go in and out and do kind of like, shorter runs outside the US mainly.
Yep.
So, down to South America for a run of dates, over to Europe, whatever. Obviously coming down to Australia, they'll be using their lightweight or lighter weight stuff. Mm-hmm. So this is them going down from 12 trucks to 7.
Right. Yeah. It's still a big production, just not as big. Yeah.
It was actually Bob, and I mentioned Bob Strakel before, who's he's their long-term front of house sound engineer. Ultimately Bob's responsible for how things sound out front. Mm-hmm. I've got to know Bob and kind of like really trying to understand what that job might be like. Like if you're a front of house sound engineer for a show of that size, I'm like, dude, you got a lot on your shoulders, man. And he's like, yeah, yeah, it's a pretty important role, And so he actually, because with the technology that's around these days, right, every show gets recorded, multi-track, and he can play back. He plays back all the mixes, and he can work because he's using a digital SSL console. SSL, I've got this technology where you can basically take all of that, the big hardware console, right? But you can take all of that and run it on your laptop separately, right? All completely virtualized. And so he's constantly working on the mix of the tones and how he's setting up, and as I see, you watch a few of his videos and you get a glimpse into that world. So when it comes to the front of house tone, he's kind of the arbiter of all of that, obviously Jim and Mick, it has to feel right for them as players.
Right.
But Bob has a huge influence on, obviously, what things, how it's going to sound out front. So it was Bob that actually called me, I don't know, maybe 6 or 9 months ago, somewhere around that time frame, and described to me what was happening in terms of they were building these lighter weight fly rigs for the guys. And it was, kind of Brad, who's Jim's guitar tech. And you've seen Brad, like Jim just did a couple of rig reviews. They're up on YouTube now when he was in the UK. One on Anderton's with Lee, the captain.
Yep. I saw.
And another one, I'm not sure who the host was, but another Europe-based one, where they briefly talk about the preamp and so on. And Jim actually shows his rig, which is a quad Cortex-based rig. Now, Bob called me, as I said, 9 months ago and said this was happening. And he said, man, the digital thing's okay. It's kind of fine, but yeah. But, there's always a but. And the but is, they still didn't think it was necessarily as, the full experience that they were getting with the heads and the cab and all the rest of it.
Right.
So he put it to me, he said, could you do an alpha preamp? And I was like, oh man, maybe, yeah. Yeah. Maybe, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Obviously started thinking about it. Yeah.
And it's not just as simple as, well, I'll just take the power amp section out and there you go. Right. I mean, there's got to be some additional tweaking that you got to do to it.
Yeah. This is, so Ryan, we mentioned, I think you mentioned this very early in this discussion actually about the importance of the power amp. And, like we all probably know this, but man, was I ever reminded about that when I did this? Because I built that, I got the prototype up I've only actually built one, which is Jim. Jim's got it right, and hopefully by if I get some time by the end of January, I'm gonna build a couple more, because I've got to.
If you need somebody to test one,
yeah,
certainly would do that for you.
Yeah, awesome. That's good to know. That's good to know. I do. I mean,
get in line.
I absolutely want to bring that out as a product, right?
Yes.
Make no mistake, but I've got to kind of go through a couple more iterations of kind of like the custom build thing. This is kind of part of the product development cycle. You kind of put together, the prototypes really. They're handmade, like that preamp. I mean, I tried to make it kind of look finished and relatively professional.
Right.
The media stuff looks really good, Jason.
It's all hand drilled, man.
Yeah,
it looks
like
beautiful.
On a drill press. Did
Are
it
you
all
like,
myself,
hand folding the aluminum and all that?
I should say, yeah.
Out there with
like
the
you can buy
machine.
like the local electronics store here, one of the kind of hobby supply places here in Melbourne. You can buy rack kits, for hobbyists. People build hi-fi preamps or God knows what else in them. So that's kind of that's where it started. But I designed up some faceplates and got those made, and you just kind of put these things together. And once you settle on the design, then I'll draw all that up in CAD and I'll get enclosures fabricated properly and all the rest of it, right? And there's a few different options for that, including KSR, because they do. Kyle's already got a bunch of rack mount products that he has in the KSR brand, so he's already got the tooling and everything there to be able to do all that stuff. But yeah, so I got the preamp up and running, Ryan, and the first iteration of that was just literally a replica of it's the preamp out of the SAM.
Yeah,
like the same. It's got MIDI in it. It's got everything. It's exactly the same, pretty much, right? And then it's got an effects loop in it. Okay, so the preamp actually has it's got a stereo effects loop, a mono return and a mono send and stereo return.
That was my next question. Thank you.
And then stereo out, because obviously when I was thinking about preamps, I was instantly thinking, stereo, stereo power amp, stereo rig. That's how it was, right? And how it should be with all that stuff. And so I was thinking, okay, so I'm going to have a stereo return on the effects loop, and then the return stage of the loop can then drive the outputs, because then you could take it out to a power amp and then you could drive a cabinet. But I found quite quickly, of course, that if you don't have the tube power amp imparting its character on that sound, it's flat as. Like the sound of a tube preamp put into a very linear power amp, like a solid state linear kind of hi-fi style power amp, and then put into your guitar cabinet, it's
sounds like ass.
Pretty sterile, man. It's like oh man, it's just not there, like it doesn't have that bottom end thump.
Yep.
And it doesn't have that top end sizzle that we like, And this is where, if you think about your amplifier, and they all kind of modern high gain stuff has this, right? A presence and a depth.
Yeah.
That's working in the power amp.
Yep.
Okay. We probably all know this, but the presence and the depth circuit are in the negative feedback part of the power amp. And so those controls allow you to shape the response and character of the power amp. And in these high gain amps where you have that, you want that thump, that power amp is a hugely important part of it. So what Jim's actually doing with his preamp is he's got this is all facilitated through Brad Clifford, his guitar tech. I did a whole lot of captures of the Alta power amp quad cortex captures, because I knew that the way that they were going to run this preamp is in his rack where he's got his quad cortex.
Okay.
Right.
So it's analog, all tube analog pre, out of the preamp into a power amp capture, which if you listen to the power amp capture on the quad cortex, it's just clean. It's like, just sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But it's
But
got
it adds that back in, yeah.
It's got that response curve, or it's kind of like got that, that it's got that tube goodness in terms of the character that imparts, and so with that preamp into that back end, that's where it's like it sounds the same, like in terms of the tone that you get through studio monitors, or into your DAW or whatever recorded, and for them into the PA,
Yeah.
I couldn't distinguish it between the actual head and the preamp, because in the preamp I had dialed it in to be the same. It's the same components, the same voltages, same circuit, and all the rest of it, which then led me to my next part, which is when I talk about the next cycle of product development for the preamp, is I'm exploring options for embedding that capability into the preamp.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is like the Friedman IRX and the Soldano, X88 IR, whatever.
X88, yep.
And the Synergy, the brand new Synergy head that's just about to be released or has been released or whatever.
Right.
And, the whole Boutique Amps family of products are all embedding this technology now, right? Which is, I think, super cool. Where you've got a tube analog pre with a digital back end, and the digital back end, kind of needs to be power amp modeling and IR.
Right.
So you've got, preamp and the power amp and the cab, and with that embedded, you could then literally come out of that preamp and straight to your desk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, see, that's what over here I've got a second I call B rig or B desk. If I ever had a guest, and I wanted them to play, I've been going through all kind of different iterations of try this combination and this combination and that combination. That's pretty much what I wanted over there, was something silent that you could just plug a guitar into it and then go straight into the desk. And so far, the Synergy is kind of the best that I've found based on what Jimmy was doing with his, and then Randy then got that as well. So I have one as well that I've been toying with, but it's still not quite there for my ear. So
what I'm really interested in knowing, actually, and I'm going to ask you some product development questions on the fly here, but given you guys are using these products, I'm super so I'm aware that the Syn 2 or whatever it is, like this is the rack mount, rack mount unit, right? And you can put two modules in or whatever. So before the Boutique Amps, before they had this kind of IR loading stuff like that, that has a cab sim or a power amp kind of sim capability built into the rack.
That's correct, yeah.
But it's also got a direct output, which doesn't have that in it. Is that correct? Like it has a direct and it also a sim?
Yes, I think you can turn it on or off.
Oh, okay, turn it off and on. So same output. So do you guys use it with that sim stuff on or off? Like how do you set it up?
Yes, you have to have it on. For it to.
Interesting.
Let Jimmy speak to it. He's pretty much the master, isn't he?
Yeah.
I'm actually totally happy with the cab sim and the Syn 2.
You want to load it up, Jimmy, real quick, and let him hear how that thing sounds?
Yeah. So Jimmy, you coming straight out of that, straight into the stream, straight out of the back of that.
Yep. Just pretty simple setup. It's just the Syn 2, and then I got a couple pedals in the front of it.
Yep.
And then I have my effects loop with your standard sounds, chorus, delay, reverb, And I have some added EQ on the end of the stereo effects loop as after the delays. I have two graphic EQs, one on each channel.
And I think that's a big, big, big part of his sound.
Right.
Those EQs on the end.
Yeah. And then just it's stereo out into a Rodecaster Pro 2, and that's about as basic.
What do you
as
do
can
with the
get.
EQ curve? Are you kind of rolling off some top end and boosting the bottom, or what are you doing with that?
I'm just basically doing the old smiley face,
Oh, yeah.
EQ curve, and I kind of try to adjust them a little bit different for each channel. That way you can kind of get a little bit more separation, and one side sounds a little bit different than the other channel.
Yeah. Fire it up and give him a little sample of it. But
I want to ask Jason something before I forget. With the Alta, it's once you kind of have your gain level set and your tone stack set the way you like it, pretty much everything that you touch, like the clipping diodes and the bright switches and all the rest of it, it's just all, everything of it is all done, and it comes out very, very well. It doesn't matter, even if that's not what you're particularly looking for, it still sounds like a great example of that. My question is regarding the response knob, because that thing is probably, I would say, almost one of the most powerful knobs on that amp.
Yeah.
And it does a huge amount with the tone shaping, I find.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's awesome. It's absolutely awesome.
Yeah. So that's controlling overall negative feedback.
Right.
Actually, right. So it's people come up with different names for these things, but it's so like on the amp, it's like it's sitting right in between the depth and presence, isn't it? You got the three knobs and the power right down here.
Yep.
The power, controlling the power section is depth, response, and presence, because they're literally all connected. Yes, Dan, we're going to do it, man. Because the depth and the presence are part of the negative feedback circuit.
Right.
So depth obviously is controlling bottom end and the negative feedback. Presence, high end, and the negative feedback, which in turn controls the response of the power amp itself. And then the response is how much of that tone shaping. So if you turn the response all the way off, all the way to zero, it's actually truckloads of negative feedback now in the amp.
Right.
And that makes the whole kind of power amp a bit darker and a bit more kind of damped and a bit tighter as well. And one little trick, John, I don't know if you played with it. I have talked about this maybe once or twice on videos, but if you turn that response all the way off,
right,
or close to being off, it'll kind of get super dark.
Yeah.
Just crank the presence up. Like bring the presence all the way up to 8 or 9. And all of a sudden it'll come back at you and it'll be balanced again.
Right.
But the amp will sound completely different. It'll sound more like almost like a Mark Series amp at that point.
That was my point of saying, is that I have done a little bit of mucking about with it, and you can get Fender cleans out of this thing by just mucking around with, it seems, that knob. I mean, it's odd, and it's fantastic, because I know Dave's amp, the BE, has one of those, or a variant, or a three-way switch for negative feedback. But this is a it's like almost like a mastering knob or something. The way you can fine tune with it, or you can make massive changes with it.
Yeah.
And change it into a different amp altogether, basically, like you said.
Jimmy, you good to go?
Right on. Yeah. So that you know what I'm running through, Jason, is basically I've been using the same two modules I've had this for probably 6 years now.
Okay.
And when I first got into it, there was a limited amount of modules, and the two that kind of stood out to me was the BEBB and the SLO module.
Right.
And I've bought a couple other modules, and I keep going back to the to the BE. And I'm now using the SLO2 because of the 2 channels, because that was like the first thing that I thought. It's like, wow, this would be great if there were 2 channels and I could dial one different for for lead sound. So it works pretty good for me, because I go I have clean all the way up to a lead channel, so I got 4 channels clean to lead. And
Is that SLO2? Does that have like a tight
yes.
switch or something on it?
So the original SLO module has the tight built into it.
Oh, I see.
So version 2 they give you the option between tight and normal
On both channels.
as well as overdrive and what is it, the normal and overdrive channel, separate switches for each. The SLO2 I found a little bit aggressive and a little bit too compressed, so I put 5751 tubes in it, and it calmed it down a little bit. So now I can, it makes the gain knob a little bit more usable, and it just, it's still compressed, but it's not as compressed, and it just sounds a little cleaner.
But see, I think that's a point that Randy was making earlier, is that the way that we're using it, going straight to the desk instead of going to a power amp and through a cabinet, we have to make some adjustments for what we're doing. But hit a couple chords, Jimmy. I mean, listen to how this sounds here.
So this is the BE channel. I got most of the goop on what I usually play with. So. I mean, that's not bad for that's the Bucks or the Buxom Betty channel on that.
Okay, right. It's super wide in my monitors here. That's wide as.
Yeah, that's thanks to the the stereo effects loop. So I'm running 2 choruses and a TC Electronics Mimic because I'm going
cool.
for
the Mimic, cool.
The super wide sound. So this is the BE channel, and I have a Buxom Boost that's on all the time, and it's just basically with the EQ on, and the EQ is just set like at 666, and then with the
number
gain
of
knob,
rock.
just to the,
Of course, it's 666.
Yeah. The gain knob set to right to the point where you can hear the gain like start to bloom, and then I just kind of just back it off just a little bit, because I like nice tight sounds.
And typically when we mix that in with our backing tracks and so forth, it just sounds, pristine. So,
oh man, I've heard it.
If there's something that things are progressing, things are getting better, and if there's something that we can plug in and just put in some stereo effects, and then it comes through, sounding. I'm all for it,
So the trick, Jason, I'm trying to do is get that wide, massive spread without the detune. I haven't quite figured that out.
Yeah. So have you tried? Because I've been experimenting with the same thing, right? So with this covers gig that I'm doing here at the moment, everyone's on in-ears, which when I first started playing with these guys, I was like, oh man, this sucks. So bad, because it was all silent, so I had my quad cortex, and that was, it's a handy tool for that, when I had captures of my amp, I got captures of the whole head. and I kind of started, rehearsing and stuff with that. But pretty quickly I transitioned into the rig what I'm using now, where I'm actually using a head and the cab on stage.
Yeah.
So I've got some volume. It's not stupid loud, but it's loud enough that you can kind of like you can interact with it, and you got that feedback loop that we all love, right? You got to have it. Like you can get feedback if I need it, but even just the feel of that is so important, And I've still got my in-ears in, but I'm kind of using that mainly to just make sure I can hear myself super clear, and vocal, right? I want to hear a singer. Like, I want to hear the vocals, Everything else I can kind of hear, I can hear the bass guitar because it's just everywhere, and obviously the drummer's just loud as hell, so I can hear the drummer. He's playing an acoustic kit, so it's just loud. I don't need that in my in-ears, So anyway, but what I'm doing is I'm actually, whilst I'm kind of running the traditional cab, I'm not miking it.
Okay.
And I'm very similar to what John's setup is right now, and even what it's going to be. I'm not using a reactive load because I don't need one. I've got a cabinet, but I'm tapping off a line out.
Yeah, similar to what I'm doing here.
Yeah, and I'm bringing that back into the quad cortex or an FM3 or whatever, right? It doesn't matter what you're using.
Yeah,
where I've got a cab block, an IR.
Yeah,
loaded. That's feeding front of house.
Yeah, so
and it's feeding my in-ears. So what I'm hearing here, and what the other guys in the band, if they happen to have my guitar in their in-ears, I don't know if they do or not. I don't care. What they're hearing is the impulse response rather than a mic that might be placed in a different position today than it was last week or whatever on the cabinet. But my most recent discovery with this is splitting the thing into stereo field by using just a 3 millisecond delay on one side. It's incredible. Now, Steve Vai used to do this with his SDE 3000.
Right.
So it's on like the old guitar player magazines or whatever, right? He talked about his rig that he used, right? This is back in the day when Ed obviously had, the 2 units and was starting to do the stereo setup. Mm-hmm. Well, I had one of those in his. Yeah, I got a couple too, man. Just out of shot.
Nothing like
Vi was using a couple of them, but he used one just to take a mono signal and split it. So on the left hand side, it's straight up, dry pass through.
Yep.
And then on the right channel, or vice versa, it's a 3 to 6 millisecond or so delay.
Right.
And you can do that with an FM3, like with a delay block. You can set that up. And man, it just goes boom. Yep. It's like these tones that Ryan and Jimmy were just playing through. But it's not doesn't modulate.
Yep.
Yep.
And it's not a pitch thing. It's just a timing. And so I've been doing that. The quad's got a little, I can't remember, it's a new thing that they've introduced with latest firmware or whatever. It's got the same thing. It's meant to be like a mimic pedal, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I got it set super low because if it gets I got it 3 milliseconds. If you get it too high, I find that it gets a bit like, man, it's so wide you get lost.
Yeah. You're like, bring that back in a little bit.
Yeah, bring it back a bit,
Yeah.
But man, the separation for me, playing through the back, because like you can imagine with that band setup, it's like you're playing to a backing track. Because I've got it in the ears, it's right in my bloody skull,
That's tough.
So moving the guitar out a bit and then having room for the band in the middle, just awesome.
It does seem to help mix, instead of being like straightforward, it's like it more envelops, what you're playing to for sure.
Yep.
So there was a question in the chat earlier about, do your amps have speakers in them? And obviously, a head is just a head. You need an external speaker, but it brings the question, and the question is, are there any plans for combo versions?
There's not.
Fuck that shit.
Did
I say that?
We only Headfirst only does heads.
That's right.
No, look, look, you know, combo. It's not
flawed
my
design.
thing.
It's not your thing. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I have owned a combo. I had a PV Classic 30 once.
Yeah.
You know, grab and go, cool little amp. You know, for a clean platform or whatever. But you know, I've always been a head and quad guy.
Yep.
You know, right from the big, you know, as early as I possibly could get one.
Yep.
You know?
And any time that I've had a combo in the past, I've been like, you know,
Exactly.
Okay, I want to hear it with this speaker, you know, so put it over on this 412, or
yeah,
I want to do it with this speaker over here. You can do that with a combo, but it's just like, well, why?
Look, I know people love them and use them and stuff like that. I think it's a slightly different market, and you know, and like I mean, Dave's, you know, again, I always look at what Dave's doing for inspiration, you know, and obviously in the Friedman lineup, that he's done it successfully. It's got combos, and people buy them. I mean, I worked on one. A Runt 50 combo was in here in my workshop 2 days ago. You know, it's just a very small repair job, which.
Yep.
This is gonna again tells you what Dave was like, right? This guy contacted Dave and said the power switch on the amp had failed. Dave sent me 4 replacement power switches that turned up like a week later, and he sent me an email and said, "Oh yeah, this guy's going to come around with his amp. I've sent you some switches that you can use to." You know, the guy, and obviously the customer, this guy Zevon, who owns the amp, he's like, I emailed Dave, and he goes, I didn't even expect a response. He goes, half an hour later, I had a reply from him, and he told me he was going to send you, Jason, you know, he was going to send you out some replacement switches, and that I was to bring the amp around to you to get it fixed. And I'm like, yeah, that's what he's like. He's like, this guy's
ultimate customer service for sure.
Yeah, so like, and this guy, you know, he's a kind of blues rootsy player,
Right.
Yeah, he sings and he plays guitar. He's a great player actually, and he's like, man, yeah, he's like, he asked me, he's like, are you going to do combos? And I'm like, I don't know, man.
It all depends. Can you go fuck yourself?
Well, I would never have one. I mean, I actually personally find a head and a cabinet way more convenient to carry around than a big freaking heavy combo.
Yeah. I guess it really wouldn't matter logistically, since you're going to be doing cabinets and so forth over here, that you could do a combo, but
there's something to having those tubes hanging in a enclosure and all that stuff that's not all that I don't necessarily think is the best thing.
Plus, usually, you know, it's easier on your back just to move one piece at a time, right?
I think so.
Big, huge combo, awkward to carry.
I mean, there was a younger guy here yesterday, and this gives me some hope for the younger generation of guitar players. But yesterday, I had 2 customers in the workshop. Again, this is kind of like mod, and you know, I always take an old Marshalls. You know, people contact me and say, you know, I've got a Fender Blues Junior that is not working, and I'm like, I'm not your guy, right? I don't do that. There's
right.
Plenty of other guys around that'll do repair work like that. Not interested. But if someone contacts me, you know, they've got like, you know, I've got a 1978 JMP. Yes, I'll look at it. I always take that shit in, you know, because it's like, I just love those old amps, man, you know, and like, and I know them backwards, right? So I was like happy to take that stuff in. So there was a guy who dropped off a mid 80s 800. And I could tell by when he spoke to me on the phone, I thought, no, he's not 50. Like he's a younger guy, right? Guy rocks up, early 20s maybe, like early 20s, rocker, long hair.
Yeah. And
I'm like, dude, you fucking got JCM 800, man. This is amazing. I said, what made you? He said, everyone else your age is buying bloody modelers and crap like that. And I'm like, and he's like, man, this is the real stuff. I'm like,
Yes. Thank you.
There's hope. There is hope.
Yep. Well,
And then this other guy came around in the afternoon, and he was the same age, and he was complaining about carting around his AC30 2x12 combo.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, wow. And he's like, yeah, I've got one, early 70s, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, man, that's incredible. Again, I'm used to speaking to people your generation and using a digital modeler. And he's like, nah, no way.
There's a younger kid that I've met around here, and great player. I think he teaches ukulele or does ukulele lessons now. But anyway, that's what he was using. He was using the modeler stuff and this and that. And he said, no, this is good. This is the future. This is what's going on. I said, have you ever really played a real tube amp rig? Well, not really. I brought him over here.
Come here, son.
and let him play through this rig. He was like, oh my God, I got to get a tube amp. A lot of them haven't even tried it yet, so they don't know. So
it's just a whole different experience, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. There's, like you said,
I think it's for people like, when you made me think about how would you describe it to people that don't play guitar, and and there's probably people listening on the channel, right, who don't necessarily play guitar, but they just love music and they love Van Halen and all that good shit. Well, it's like the difference between, I don't know, listening to music on headphones and then going to a live gig.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
The power and that kind of like, everyone knows what, and you can remember maybe going to some of your early concerts when you're a teenager or whatever, and just like the experience of feeling the sound as well as hearing it.
Yep.
It's like nothing else,
David Gilmour described it as why he has the stage volume so loud. He says, well, it's just because of the feeling that you get, and it's just this wall of sound behind you that you feel like you could lean against, and it would hold you up. And it's that's the same feeling that I get, when you crank that stuff up and it's moving the hair on your arms, and you can feel that, and it's thumping your chest. Yeah, you can't get that from a modeler.
No,
that's directly connected to your cock, basically, right? Well, it is, right? It's a total power thing, and you get into that. Well, never mind that, but you get into the rhythm of it, and you get lost in it. You become much more than a guy playing a guitar. It's a whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
I mean, why do you think I've gone through all this getting, a direct box to come into this thing? That you just can't beat it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's just age or whatever it is, but there's no way you're going to get it out of zeros and.
Well, John, here's a question for you. Did you try the amp at like just barely cracked on the volume to see and how does it sound at
Fantastic.
that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not one that you've got to really crank. You've got master volumes on this one as well, Jason.
Yeah, oh yeah, 2 of them.
Yeah, there's there's individual channel volumes, so you can balance channel 1, 2, and 3. Like for example, when I'm using this in that covers band, I'm using channel 3 just for leads.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I don't play any rhythm guitar on channel 3, even though for heavier stuff you could. So I'm using the channel volume for channel 3 set louder. That's how I'm getting my kind of lead tone with a volume boost. Right. But on the rear of the amp are 2 global master volumes. So on that, one of the options on that panel here at the front is to activate the second master. And the reason that I put that on there, again, I was thinking about using this amp live. What do I need if I'm using the amp live? Well, I want to have 2 volume levels, because maybe I want a volume boost on a clean tone. Right. And again, it's that versatility of like all of a sudden you're covering a tune that has a lead break in it, but it's a clean tone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I need a volume boost, right? So how do I get that? Well, I activate that second master volume. So I'll have like volume 1 set maybe midday or whatever, and then volume 2 set at 2 p.m. And that's a decent volume jump.
Yeah.
The other reason that I put it in there is that if you want to, again, using the amp live and you want to bring the clipping diode function in and out. When you put the clipping diodes on, it compresses.
Yep.
And you get a volume drop. Anyone who's played with a sat switch on a Friedman knows this, right? Because it's the same concept.
Yep. Yep.
You put it on, and you get more gain. It kind of feels more compressed, but you get a volume drop. So with the MIDI system, you can you could be blasting away on channel 2 with the clipping off. You could put the clipping on and activate the second master volume at the same time, and have the volumes equal. It's probably what you have got yours set up, John. Maybe
this is, and then with the clipping in. Of course, I've got the big the detune bullshit going on as well, but that's the two master volumes working.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Is that your Pete Thorne? That's your Pete Thorne? Huh?
Yeah.
And you changed the pickups in it?
Yes, on the advice of Randy and Jimmy, I put in a tone zone and an Air Norton because it was so bright, the guitar.
Yeah, they are, aren't they?
Yeah.
How are you liking those pickups in it?
It's great so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. The big piece I'm waiting for is the load box.
The sewer.
Because it'll get a little closer to what and it sounds great. It sounds the way it is right now. It sounds fantastic, but to get it close to what it, with a little bit of the thing that Jason's amp has is bottom end and girth, while being tight and all of that stuff. And this thing knackers that a bit, and it'll be nice to have that represented.
Get that back in there. Yeah.
In here. Yep.
I guess we lost Simon earlier.
Yeah,
he had to duck out. He said he had.
And he said his laptop ran out of juice. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I didn't quite see him leave. So appreciate Simon joining us. We are 2 hours and 20 minutes in. We can go all night if you want, but I think we're gonna probably start wrapping things up.
Yeah.
So, Jason, appreciate it greatly that you came back and talked to us again. I'd like to get you guys to come and jam with us.
Yeah, man. I'm happy to jump in and have a play one day. That'll be fun.
Yeah, and
Simon,
keep us
we should definitely get Simon doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
He's already committed to me, so he's.
We'll all just take the day off and just watch him jam.
We'll hit the backing tracks and watch YouTube.
Yeah, we'll just back off and let him go.
Well, what would be what would be super interesting, actually, and I'm sure he'd be up for it, is don't just play the track and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Like he'll figure it out.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
And I watched him when in that 12 tones video. Just one final story. The Dokken. I think there's a Dokken track in there, right?
Just before the Landau track.
Yeah. And he kind of that happened because he kind of chanced upon that Landau tone. Like he was playing with the volume knob on the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
I think he had his 5150 guitar. And he rolled the volume back and he was like, this is channel 2 with the clipping on, I'm pretty sure, because we were pissing around when he was doing some Main Street stuff and all that. And he rolled the volume down and he went, that's the tone. And he started playing the Landau thing. And then he went, what I want is something with a lot of gain before it. And then I can just roll back and we roll into the Landau thing. And I'm like, yeah, sounds fine, man, whatever. And he's like, and he played a bit and he went, it's like a Dokken thing. And he goes, I don't know any Dokken. And I said, well, I don't. So he just queued up that song and he learnt it.
Just right there.
Just like that.
Yeah.
It took him 30 seconds. So I was like, okay. I know it's not the most complex thing, but he just he's forensic on these things, man. I've watched him learn a few things now in real time. And he gets right into the minutiae of the playing. It's quite amazing to watch. I'm close enough is good enough,
Right.
Yeah, he's
Well, I think the funny thing is when he hangs out with us mere mortals, he just kind of dumbs everything down, you know?
I
he
think
is so good, you know.
What
such a great guy.
What fascinates me about him is his commitment to the craft.
yeah.
His live without a net replication.
Yeah.
The time and effort that must have taken to learn that as closely as he did.
Right. It's insanity.
Just shows the absolute sheer dedication and the commitment that he had to learn that for, the tribute that he did for Edward to play that.
Isn't it just insane? Because it's like
phenomenal.
He's laying on the beach right now going, you dumb fuckers, it only took me about 45 minutes.
Right.
That shit's easy, man. Come on.
It's one thing to play the licks, right? I mean,
To feel.
and he can play all that stuff. But to actually play that with the timing of the original video, the original audio, because it's synced up.
It's like it matches right up. Yeah. Yep.
That's the bit that is like, and I've had I've had a glimpse into how he sets up to do that, and it's just like, man,
it is so close, so spot
talk
on.
about commitment to the thing. That was the other thing. Just one more story about Simon, but that little encounter with Nuno that we had backstage after the Extreme gig, he turned around and he saw Simon. Nuno did, and he gave Simon a hug. Like the best I got was a handshake,
Right.
Like introduced him, I said, hi, I'm Jason, whatever. And he's like, g'day, hi, or whatever. He saw Simon and he gave him a hug and, he's chatty. Afterwards, Pat Badger came around and said hi because remember, we got backstage passes through this connection who's friends with Pat. And Pat came up and he said, oh, you're Jason. He said, you're Mark's friend. And I said, well, spoken to Mark a bunch. This is the guy from Shure Microphones, right? Because I worked on an old JMP for Mark and kind of resurrected this thing that was, that wasn't working. And anyway, Pat turns around and he says to Simon, he said, Nuno was talking about you. We're all like, I was like, what? And Simon's like, what? And he goes, yeah. He said, you're recognized as being one of the best Van Halen guys out there doing it.
Yeah.
Even Nuno knows.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Before
One of the
we
best.
part,
That's
I
a
do
pretty high honor.
Yeah, one of the best I've seen.
Before we part, I do want to say this. When I got the amp, the first thing I did was I took it out of its head shell because I'm a fucking lunatic. And
Warranty void.
Right.
what that thing looks like on the inside it's like a surgery table. Like it's just absolute flawless inside. And the cool circuit boards are white. It's awesome, man. It looks just as good on the inside as it does on the outside. I think I sent Randy a picture of it. Put it on there without the head shell.
Very cool.
I think I responded with, well, that's a good way to avoid your fucking warranty.
So what do you mean? Jason doesn't cover them all up in goop, so you can't reverse engineer it? Yeah.
God forbid John have a warranty problem. Jason's like, oh, fuck that guy. He opened it up.
Well, actually, when I flipped it over and looked inside, I said, fuck you, John. And from Jason. So I knew you were going to do that, you prick.
Right.
Drew a dick and some steaming dog shit in there for you.
Nope. It's got your signature on the inside and everything. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, for sure, keep us updated on how the preamp thing is going because I was really interested in the Soldano one, the X88 IR or whatever that was. Is that something that you would consider for yours? Would also be to load in the IRs and that type of thing as well?
Yeah. So I'm actually in direct contact with Two Notes, and they have. It's a bit out of focus on the thing, right? That is their embedded DSP card.
Oh wow!
Or board, whatever you want to call it, right? This is a product that they that manufacturers like myself and others can embed their technology into their unit.
Okay.
So the reason that you'd want to do that, of course, is basically speed to market, and like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. They've already done it. So that they have power amp modeling, everything that's in the Captor X and more actually is in this board. So the next iteration of that preamp in terms of product development is integrating this in the unit, so that you will have the option of a direct out or a simulated, power amp and cab sim. And this basically connects in, so you put a USB port on the back of the unit, and the 2 Notes software just plug straight in, so you can use all the Dyne IR cabs that they have, which is where you move the mics around and all that shit.
That's pretty slick, man.
Or you can just load up your own IRs if you got your favorite,
Yeah.
favorite whatever that you can load up. It'll support standard IRs as well as their own tech. So that's kind of like that's the goal, right? Is to have, by the time that product comes to market, if I can make all this kind of work, both in terms of work electronically and work economically as well. It'll come to market with that, because that's what I want. I want it to have the ability to go direct, because
Like I
that's
said, beta tester.
awesome. a lot easier to ship these things around too than 100 watt heads.
For sure. Well, Jason, thanks for joining us again. We got to get on out of here. I got to work tomorrow. And it's still probably late afternoon for you there.
It's 20 to 4.
Okay, so coming up early evening. It's nearly midnight here for me. So.
Oh well, it's late.
Yeah. So I'm going to get going. Again, thank you to Simon for jumping in. Simon, sorry you had to split on out of here, but thanks for joining in. Everybody in the chat, thanks for joining us and chatting it up. Sorry we didn't get to too much of the comments tonight. We're kind of geeking out over here with all this cool stuff, and would certainly like to have you back again, Jason, for sure. So
anytime.
Get you back jamming and maybe get Simon on here like we mentioned. But so we'll be back here with some more Trans Trim stuff. Trans Trim Thursday coming up. And I think I got an email from Edward Nugent Jr. He's got a guitar that he won off of somewhere called the Fret or something like that.
Oh, shit.
Oh, look at here. Let me get you soloed out here. Where are we? There we go.
I've been wanting to show you this guitar for a while, Ryan, but I keep forgetting about it. I've owned this, I think it was 1990. I got this.
I made it through nearly the whole night without my browser crashing. And when he pulls out the Steinberger, I didn't get to look at it. So.
Oh, you want to see it again?
Yeah, if you could.
Yeah, of course.
Right on. Now, how long have you had this one?
I was 20.
Oh, so just a couple years.
34 years.
Wow.
Yes. I don't play it much these days, but yeah, I love it.
Where did you happen to find it?
I walked into a guitar store in Wellington, New Zealand, which is where I was born and grew up. Not in Wellington. I was actually born in a place called Hamilton, which is just up, not far from Auckland. And I was looking for. I was actually going to buy a Les Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of saved up. I had this money. I'm going to find a Les Paul, and they were always just kind of out of my price range, so I still didn't quite have enough money. And I walked into this store in Wellington, and that guitar was just sitting on a guitar stand on the ground, because obviously they couldn't hang it.
Yeah.
and I knew, no one knew what those guitars were.
Yeah.
But I fucking knew. I was like,
yep.
Did you get a deal or?
I'll have that one.
I just straight away, I was like, can I try that guitar? And the guy's like, yeah, go for it. It was $1,250.
Oh, yeah.
New Zealand dollars.
Nice.
I don't know what the exchange rate is, but I would have bought it right on the spot too.
Look, it's Kiwi dollar to the US is I don't know what it was back then, but right now it's probably 1.6 to 1. So
Same as
that's
the Canadian
probably
dollar, basically.
700 US, maybe 800. I mean, this was 30 years ago.
So in current money, 1,200 Kiwi dollars is 675 US
Oh
dollars.
my word! You stole that thing.
That's
I'll
awesome,
never
man.
sell it, man. That is
No,
going
no,
to
no,
the
no.
grave.
That
So can
thing
you play
now
all-
is worth more than that Les Paul you were looking for. I'm sure.
Yeah. What do you reckon? What do you reckon it would be worth?
In that condition,
Pretty mint. Yeah.
pretty.
I was a second owner, I think, I believe. Yeah.
The neck is in pretty good shape. No scuffs,
yeah.
dents,
Mint.
dings, and it's got a trans trim on it.
Transstream. Yep.
That thing would probably in a good market, when things are moving, probably at least 45 to $5,000 US.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yep.
So do you play Summer Nights, Get Up, Me Wise Magic, and then you put it back down?
What else are you going to play on it? I mean, there's nothing else to play.
I didn't even know it's in tune.
Sorrow.
Yeah.
Because I haven't played this forever. I can't remember how to play it. But yeah, that's up a minor third.
We'll have to have you come on for Transtrim Thursday and take over the reins of playing that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, man, it's been a long time since I was playing that shit. But yeah, man, that I can never get the Transtrim perfect all the way. I don't know, Ryan, whether you've had.
I got
success with it.
some tricks and tips for you. Yeah.
Okay,
So
well, you have to tell me about it one day.
yeah, we'll have to
There's an actual video, Jason, where he took the whole fucking thing apart and replaced a bunch of spring and a bunch of whole other.
I did a pivot plate replacement on this one, which is basically you just explode the thing apart, and the piece that you see. Let's see. Well, you can't really see it there,
Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
down in here you see those two little screws down there on that pivot plate.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's a replacement plate, and the reason I replaced that when I got this, that little bar that goes down was just tweaked a little bit and had a little crack in it. But yeah, they're not that complicated when you take them apart. You see how they work. I mean, if you can build an amp, you could certainly rebuild a trans trim. But there's definitely some tweaks and secrets to getting this kind of dialed in to stay in tune. So yeah, we'll hook up at some point. We'll go over a couple little tricks.
Cool.
But yeah, we keep trying to get out of here.
All right. Put the guitars down there. Yeah.
We'll see everybody here Transtrim Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, and then once again on Sunday for our community jam. Anybody's welcome to send in some videos of your recordings for Sunday. We'll put you on, or we'll have you on live. But for Thursday, Edward had a guitar unboxing that he wanted to do, so he's going to be coming on Thursday, and we'll get that done for him. Got some stuff that was sent to me as well, a couple of little unboxings for Thursday, so we will see everybody then. So once again, appreciate it, everybody
Thanks,
coming
brother.
out,
Appreciate it.
hanging out with us. Big thanks to Jason for sure.
Super cool.
And we will see everybody next time. Once I get over here, get to that. So hang out just a bit, Jason, if you don't mind, and we'll say some goodbyes backstage in just a bit. So later, everybody.
Backwards, living backwards, living backwards.
Eddie Van Halen here, telling you, keep playing, man. Gotta keep playing. It's the only thing there is. Music, man. Keep playing. All right? I'm gonna come looking for you if you don't.